Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End. Might makes right. 50 years is ample time in which to change a world beyond recognition, and its people almost beyond recognition. The only things required for the task are a sound knowledge of social engineering, a clear sight of the intended goal, and power. These things the Overlords possessed. Though their goal was hidden, their knowledge was obvious, and so was their power. That power took many forms, few of them realized by the peoples whose destinies the Overlords now ruled. The might enshrined in their great ships had been clear enough for every eye to see, but beyond that display of sleeping force were other and much subtler weapons. Chapter 1. Earth and the Overlords. Before she flew to the launch site, Helena Lekhoff always went through the same ritual. She was not the only cosmonaut who did so, though few ever talked about it. It was already dark when she left the administration building and walked past the pine trees until she came to the famous statue. The sky was crystal clear, and brilliant full moon had just risen. Automatically, Helena's eyes focused on Mare Imbrium, and her mind went back to the weeks of training at Armstrong Base, now better known as Little Mars. You died before I was born, Yuri, back in the days of the Cold War, while our country was still under the shadow of Stalin. What would you have thought if you heard all the foreign accents in Star Village today? I think you would have been very happy. I know you would have been very happy if you could have watched us now. You would have been an old man, but you still might be alive. What a tragedy that you, the very first to enter space, never lived to see men walk on the moon. But you, too, must have dreamed of Mars. And now we are ready to go there and open a new age in which Konstantin Telekovsky dreamed 100 years ago. When we met again, I will have much to tell you. She was already halfway back to her office when a busload of belated tourists came to a sudden halt. The doors opened and the passengers poured out, cameras at the ready. There was nothing that the deputy commander of the Mars expedition could do but summon up her public smile. Then, before a single photograph could be taken, everyone started shouting and pointing at the moon. Helena turned just in time to see it disappear behind a gigantic shadow sliding across the sky, and for the first time in her life, she felt the fear of God. Mission Commander Mohan Kalir stood on the rim of the crater, looking across the sea of frozen lava to the far rim of the caldera. It was hard to grasp the scale of the scene, or to imagine the powers that had raged there, and the tides of molten rock ebbed and flowed, creating the ramparts and terraces spread out before him. Yet everything he saw could be lost inside the stupendous volcano he must face less than a year from now. Kilauea was merely a scale model of Olympus Mons, and their training might have been helplessly unprepared for the reality. He remembered now, on Inauguration Day, 2001, the President of the United States had echoed Kennedy's 40-year promise, "We must go to the moon," by proclaiming that this would be the century of the solar system. Before 2100 dawned, he had confidently predicted that men would have visited all the major bodies orbiting the sun, and would be living permanently on at least one of them. The rays of the just risen sun were catching the wisp of steam emerging from the cracks of lava, and Dr. Kalir was reminded of the morning mists that gathered in the labyrinth of night. Yes, it was easy to believe he was already on Mars with his colleagues in half a dozen countries. This time, no one nation, or indeed could, go it alone. He was returning to the helicopter when some premonition, some movement glimpsed out of the corner of his eye, made him stop. Puzzled, he glanced back into the crater. It was some little time before he thought he was looking at the sky. Mohan Kalir realized, as did Helena Lekhoff at that same moment, that history of his men had known it had come to an end. The glittering monster sailing across beyond the clouds, more miles above his head than he dare guess, made The little cluster of spacecraft up there at Lagrange seemed as primitive as log canoes. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Mohan watched as the world was watching, while the great ship descended in their overwhelming majesty. He felt no regrets as the work of his lifetime were swept away. He had labored to take men to the stars, and now the stars, the aloof, indifferent stars, had come to him. This was the moment when history held its breath and the present sheared asunder from the past as an iceberg split from its parent cliffs and goes sailing out into the sea of lonely pride. All the past ages had achieved was as nothing now. Only one thought echoed and re-echoed in Mohan's mind and the brain. The human race was no longer alone.